My name is Emily, and I'm a 30-year-old nurse. I met David, my husband, when we were both in college. We fell in love quickly and got married soon after graduation. I thought I had hit the jackpot. David was kind, caring, and everything I wanted in a partner. But then I met his mother, Carol, and my world turned upside down. The first time I met Carol, she seemed friendly enough. She invited us over for dinner and spent the whole time asking me questions about my family and my background. I thought she was just trying to get to know me better, but as time went on, I realized that there was something more going on. It started with small comments, things like, "Oh, you're wearing that," or "You're so lucky David is with you." I tried to brush it off, but as time went on, her comments became more pointed and more hurtful. She would criticize my appearance, my job, and even the way I cooked. I couldn't understand why she was being so cruel to me. One day, I asked David if he had noticed anything strange about his mother's behavior. He sighed and told me that Carol had never approved of any of his girlfriends. She had always been overprotective of him, and he thought she was jealous that he had found someone he loved. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said. "I know it's tough, but she's always been like this. You just have to ignore her." But ignoring Carol was easier said than done. She would call us at all hours of the day and night, demanding to know what we were doing and where we were going. And where we were going. She would show up unannounced at our house, criticizing everything from the way we decorated to the food we had in our fridge. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells around her. One day, I finally confronted her. "Carol," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I don't know why you're being so mean to me. I've never done anything to hurt you." Carol just laughed. "Oh, Emily," she said, "you don't understand. I just want what's best for my son. And you're not it." I was shocked. I couldn't believe that she would say something like that to me. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean that you're not good enough for him," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You're just a nurse. You don't come from a good family, and you'll never be able to give him the life he deserves." I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. I had never felt so small and insignificant in my life. And from that moment on, I knew that my relationship with Carol was going to be a difficult one. After my confrontation with Carol, things only got worse. She began to spread rumors about me to David's extended family, telling them that I was controlling and manipulative. She would make snide comments whenever we visited her house and would often exclude me from family events. The worst incident happened on David's birthday. I had planned a surprise party for him at our house, and I had invited all of his friends and family. Carol had said she wasn't feeling well, so I thought she wouldn't be coming. But as soon as she walked through the door, I knew I had made a mistake. She started criticizing the food I'd prepared, saying that it wasn't up to her standards. She complained about the decorations, saying that they were tacky. And then, when it was time for David to open his presents, she handed him a small box and said, "I got you something better, but I'll give it to you later." I was seething with anger, but I tried to keep my cool. "Carol," I said, "I don't know why you're being so mean. Can't you just be happy for David on his birthday?" She just laughed. "I'm sorry, dear," she said. "I guess I just have higher standards than you do." David could see that I was upset, so he took me aside and whispered, "Ignore her, Emily. She's just trying to get a rise out of you." But it was getting harder and harder to ignore Carol's cruelty. She would make snide remarks whenever she saw me and would often talk to David behind my back. I could feel my relationship with her deteriorating, and I didn't know what to do about it. One day when David was at work, Carol called me. "Emily," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I was just calling to see how you're doing. I know things have been difficult between us, and I wanted to try to make amends." I was skeptical, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Okay," I said cautiously. "What did you have in mind?" "Well," she said, "I was thinking that maybe we could go out to lunch together, just the two of us. We could talk about things and try to put this all behind us." I was hesitant, but I thought that maybe this was a good opportunity to clear the air. "Okay," I said. "That sounds nice." We agreed to meet at a local restaurant the following day, but as soon as I arrived, I knew that something was off. Carol was already there, and she had a smug look on her face. "Emily," she said, I'm so glad you could make it. I have something to show you. And then, right in the middle of the restaurant, she pulled out a photo album. Inside were pictures of David with all of his ex-girlfriends. Carol had circled their faces in red pen and had written comments like "too fat" and "too dumb" underneath each. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe that she would do something like this. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I just wanted you to see," she said, her eyes glinting with malice. "I wanted you to see that David can do better than you. You're nothing special, Emily. You're just another notch on his belt." I couldn't take it anymore. I got up from the table and ran out of the restaurant, tears streaming down my face. It was clear that Carol was never going to accept me as part. As Carol's cruelty continued to escalate, I tried to distance myself from her as much as possible. David and I had planned a much-needed vacation to Europe, and I was looking forward to some time away from the stress of dealing with Carol. But Carol had other plans. The day before we were supposed to leave, Carol called me. "Emily," she said, "I have something to tell you. I don't think you should go on this trip with David." "Why not?" I asked, already knowing what was coming. "Because I don't think you're good enough for him," she said, her voice cold. "And I'm going to make sure that you can't go." And then, without warning, she hung up the phone. I tried calling her back, but she wouldn't answer. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach, and I knew that something bad was about to happen. The next morning, David and I were getting ready to leave for the airport. I had all of our passports in a folder in my bag, but when I went to grab them, they were gone. I searched the entire house, but they were nowhere to be found. And then, just as we were about to give up, Carl walked into the room holding a lighter in her hand. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I burned your passport, Emily," she said, a wicked smile on her face. "Now you can't go on your little vacation." I was in shock. I couldn't believe that she would do something like this. "How could you be so cruel?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. Carol just laughed. "You're lucky I didn't burn your whole bag," she said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have better things to do than deal with the likes of you." And with that, she left the room, leaving David and me standing there in disbelief. "What are we going to do?" I asked David, tears streaming down my face. "I don't know," he said, his voice filled with anger. "But we're not going to let her get away with this." We spent the next few hours frantically trying to come up with a plan. We tried calling the embassy, but it was too late to get a replacement passport in time for our trip. We tried calling the police, but they said they couldn't do anything without concrete proof. And then, as we were about to give up, David had an idea. "What if we just go to a different country?" he said. "We can fly to a nearby country that doesn't require a passport, and we can figure things out from there." I was hesitant, but I knew that we didn't have any other options. So we packed our bags and headed to the airport, hoping that we would be able to salvage our vacation. As we were standing in line to board the plane, my phone rang. It was Carol. "Hello?" I answered, my voice trembling. "I just wanted to call and say that I hope you have a terrible trip," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked, my anger boiling over. "What have I ever done to you?" "You exist," she said simply. "And that's enough for me to hate you." I hung up the phone feeling defeated. But as I looked at David, I knew that I wasn't going to let Carol get the best of us. We were going to enjoy our vacation no matter what. David and I had managed to salvage our vacation by flying to a nearby country that didn't require a passport. But the memory of Carol's cruelty still lingered, and we knew that we couldn't just let her get away with what she had done. As we sat in a small cafe, sipping coffee and trying to figure out our next move, David suddenly sat up straight. "I have an idea," he said, a mischievous grin on his face. "What is it?" I asked, intrigued. "We're going." I was hesitant at first, but David's determination was contagious. Together, we began to formulate a plan. The first step was to gather evidence of Carol's wrongdoing. We knew that we couldn't just accuse her of burning my passport without any proof, so we decided to install cameras in our house to catch her in the act if she tried to pull something like that again. The second step was to make Carol pay. We had talked about slashing her tires or egging her house, but we wanted something more creative. And then David had an idea. "We're going to scratch her car," he said, a sly smile on his face. At first, I was hesitant. Vandalism seemed like a serious offense and I didn't want to sink to Carol's level. But David was insistent. "She's going to pay for what she did, Emily," he said, his voice filled with anger. "We can't just let her get away with it." I knew he was right. We couldn't just let Carol continue to bully us without consequence, so we set our plan in motion. Late one night, David and I drove to Carol's house. We parked down the street, and I got out of the car with a key. I walked up to her car and, with shaking hands, scratched the words "paybacks," a bay paybacks, a bats a occur car. David and I drove away, feeling triumphant. We knew that Carol was going to be furious when she saw what we had done, but we didn't care. We had finally taken a stand against her cruelty. The next day, we received a call from Carol. "What did you do to my car?" she screamed into the phone. "I've no idea what you're talking about," David said, his voice calm. "Don't play dumb with me, David," Carol said. "I know it was you and Emily. You're going to pay for this." But we knew that Carol didn't have any proof that it was us who had scratched her car, and we felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that we had finally stood up to her. As we walked through the streets of the city hand in hand, I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in a long time. We had taken control of our lives, and we weren't going to let Carol's cruelty dictate our happiness anymore. After our successful revenge on Carol, David and I decided to move to another town to start fresh. We found a quaint little house in a quiet neighborhood, and we were excited to start our new life together. But it didn't take long for Carol to strike back. One day, we came home to find that our mailbox had been smashed in. At first, we didn't think much of it. Maybe it had just been an accident. But when it happened again a few days later, we knew that Carol was behind it. "What are we going to do?" I asked David, feeling defeated. "We can't let her get to us," he said, his voice firm. "We'll just have to be more vigilant." But it wasn't just our mailbox that was being targeted. Our neighbors started to report strange incidents. Their garbage cans would be overturned. Their plants would be uprooted, and their car tires would be slapped. It was clear that Carol was on a rampage. One day, we came home to find a note on our door. It was written in Carol's handwriting, and it read, "I told you that you would regret crossing me. You're going to pay for what you did." "What are we going to do?" I asked David, tears streaming down my face. "She's not going to stop until she destroys us." "We'll just have to keep our guard up," he said, his voice soothing. But I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. Carol was relentless, and she seemed to be getting more and more violent by the day. It was clear that we were in for a long, difficult fight. As we sat on our couch, huddled together for comfort, I couldn't help but wonder how we were going to survive this. Carol was determined to destroy us, and it seemed like she was always one step ahead. But I knew that I couldn't give up. I had to fight back no matter what it took. As the attacks from Carol continued, David and I knew that we couldn't keep living in fear. We had to come up with a plan to finally put an end to her cruelty. We spent weeks brainstorming ideas and finally came up with a plan that we believed would work. We decided to strike back at Carol in a way that would completely catch her off guard. The day of the final movie arrived. We drove to Carol's house, parked a few blocks away, and walked to her car. David had brought a can of spray paint, and he quickly began to deface the car, leaving it covered in vulgar words and offensive symbols. As we walked away from the scene, adrenaline pumping through our veins, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. We had finally struck back at Carol, and it felt good to have some control over the situation. But as we walked back to our car, we noticed something strange. Carol's car wasn't the only one that had been vandalized. In fact, several cars on the street had been targeted, including our own. As we approached our car, we realized that Carol had gotten the upper hand once again. Not only had she managed to retaliate against our latest attack, but she had also managed to leave her mark on our lives once more. "What are we going to do?" I asked David, feeling helpless. "We'll just have to keep going," he said, his voice firm. But I knew that it wasn't going to be that simple. Carol was a stubborn woman, and she seemed to thrive on causing pain and suffering. It was clear that we were in for a long and difficult fight. As we drove back to our house, I couldn't help but wonder if we would ever be able to escape Carol's grasp. She seemed to be everywhere, always one step ahead of us, but I knew that we couldn't give up. We had come too far to let Carol win. We had to keep fighting no matter what it took. The weeks following our latest attack on Carol's car were filled with tension and anxiety. We never knew what to expect next, and it seemed like every day brought a new challenge. But we didn't give up. David and I continued to work together, determined to put an end to Carol's cruelty once and for all. One day, while we were out running errands, we received a call from Carol. My heart raced as I answered the phone, unsure of what she would say. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Hello, dear," Carol said, her voice surprisingly calm. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. After all the years of hatred and cruelty, Carol was finally willing to have a conversation with us. David and I met Carol at a nearby coffee shop, our nerves on edge. We didn't know what to expect, but we were hopeful that we could finally put an end to the fighting. As we sat down at a small table, Carol looked at us both with a mix of sadness and regret. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. David and I looked at each other in disbelief. "We forgive you," David said, his voice steady. And with those words, it felt like a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. We had finally put an end to the fighting, and we could finally start to heal. Over the next few months, David and I worked hard to repair our relationship with Carol. We visited her often, and we made an effort to include her in our lives. It wasn't always easy, but we knew that it was the right thing to do. Looking back on those difficult years, I realize now that Carol's cruelty had taught me a valuable lesson. It had taught me the importance of forgiveness and the power of perseverance. And while I would never forget the pain and suffering that she had caused, I was grateful for the strength and resilience that it had given me. As David and I drove away from Carol's house, I couldn't help but smile. We had finally found peace, and we had done it together.